Welcome to the Student of the Game podcast, where we break down the lives, strategies, and advice of successful individuals who are students of their own game and masters of their own craft. My name is Tim Stone. My co-hosts are Nick Galbreath and Ian Cushing. Let's get ready to learn and grow.
Hey, this is Nick and Tim, the host of the UTC Real Estate Club podcast, and we have an amazing guest for you today, Jeff Holst. Really appreciate you joining us today, Jeff.
No, you're welcome, guys, although I don't know about the amazing part. I am here.
Well, your story is at least amazing.
Also, don't know about that, but if you say so.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. The way we like to start it is go from everything before college up to college, and then we'll sort of regroup at that point. So if you want to tell your life story up to college.
All right. So I was born in a hospital.
Okay.
I don't remember that, though. No, listen, before college, my life was the same as most people's life, right? You know, I was a kid, I grew up, I lived in West Michigan, so Grand Rapids area. My dad was a lawyer, my mom was a school teacher, but she was basically a stay-at-home mom. My mom ran some small businesses for my dad as well, so we had an ice cream store when I was like 12 or 13 years old with a miniature golf course. And so we did that. So I'm really great at miniature golf and also fat. So that's what happens when you own a ice cream store, miniature golf course when you're a child. And then we had a Yogi Bear campground. I don't know if you guys remember those or not. We had that for a couple of years while I was a young teenager, and I got to dress up like Boo Boo Bear, you know, like walk around and like sweat because it's super hot in a bear costume. And then from there, I went to high school, and I was kind of actually a weirdo. I would sneak out of my bedroom late at night and watch like late night television, and by that I mean like real estate infomercials, like how to buy real estate with no money down, because that's the kind of weird kid I was. And my dad had some rentals, so I had a little exposure to it, but that's about what I did before college. Went to high school, was on the swim team, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what did you go to college for?
Well, I went to community college for 2 years, and 3 actually, because I'm an overachiever. You know, that's what you do. You go to a 2-year program in 3 years. And I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to go to college. That was it. So I did that, and I was sitting in in like a history class. I think it was modern Renaissance, like whatever, Western European history or something like that, right? So I was in this history class, and the professor was talking about this particular sculpture by Michelangelo called the Moses. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that or not, but the Moses is like a seated sculpture with, he's got the horns of truth, and he's got this like long flowing beard and stuff. And the professor was talking about how when this sculpture was unveiled, and it was actually the centerpiece of the Pope's tomb, so it was kind of a big deal, right? The Pope was like, the president of the world or something. Like, it wasn't like, it was like more than our president, right? Like, he was super powerful and like essentially was the most important person alive at the time. And Michelangelo stood in front of the Pope and just stared at this sculpture, and he didn't say anything. He just stared at it. He's just like, and finally one of his students was like, Master, you have to say something, because they're revealing this sculpture to the Pope. And he takes his chisel and he throws it at the Moses, and he screams a single word, right? A single word, the word move. Because he was so convinced that this was like the greatest sculpture he had ever done, that he expected it to just get up and move. And I thought to myself, like, God, like, there's nothing in my life I'm that passionate about that I would stand in front of the president of the world and go crazy. So I'm doing something wrong. So I immediately dropped out of school. That's what I did. I didn't drop out that minute, but I literally finished my semester, which was finishing my associate's degree. And instead of enrolling in another undergrad university and finishing my schooling, I said, I'm going to take the little bit of money I have from my tax refund, because I got like a Hope tax refund credit or something like that. And so I'm going to take that little bit of money I have, and I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to see the Moses, and then I will know what I want to do with my life. So the Moses is in this little tiny church. It's on a hill above the Colosseum in Rome. And I called up 1-800-Priceline because I'm old, and this is before the internet was like a thing. I mean, it existed, but we didn't have like Priceline.com or Expedia or Google Flights or any of that kind of fun stuff we have now. Mm-hmm. So I called up 1-800-Priceline, and I was like, hey, I want to fly to London. And I got a ticket to London for like $300. Now, London's not exactly Rome, but I was like, if I'm going to go to Europe, I might as well make an adventure out of it. So I bought a backpack. And this is, by the way, I'd never been outside of the U.S. except for a little bit of Canada. And I'm 21 years old. And I just bought a backpack and a plane ticket and hopped on the plane and went to Europe and said, I want to figure out how to get to Rome and see the Moses. So I just did that. I just wandered around and I got some train passes, and I went down to Spain, and then I went over to Paris and Belgium, and then finally down to Rome and saw the Moses. So that's kind of like, that was my strategy, right? So I arrive in Rome, and I'd made a friend that was traveling with me. I met him on the ferry back from England to France, and I told him about the Moses and how that my whole purpose of going to Europe was to see this sculpture, and it was going to solve everything. I was going to learn what I wanted to do with my life and all this stuff. And I wandered around Rome, went to the Vatican, and went to the Colosseum, and finally I climbed the hill up to this church. It's called San Pedro in Vincole or something like that. My Italian is 0. That's about as much Italian as I know. Ciao. Right? That's about it. So I climbed the stairs up to the church, and I walk into the church. And this is a small church. I mean, honestly, it's probably like, like 4,000 square feet total. So for a medieval cathedral, it's very small. And I'm looking around, and I don't see the Moses in this church. I'm looking around. And they have like a really old box with some chains in it. It's because San Pedro in Vincole actually means St. Peter in chains. And so they have like these chains that were supposedly the chains that the angels released Peter from. So there's just Catholic relics everywhere, and there's like a piece of the true cross. I don't think that's actually there, but it was stuff like that, right? But no Moses. And finally I see in the corner like this like dark shadowy spot, and I'm like, well, it's got to be over there. There's nowhere else in the whole place to go. So I wander over there, and you can't even really see the thing. And I realized that if you drop a coin into this machine, it will light the thing up. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I find at the time it was Italian lira, but now it would be probably euros or something, or maybe the lights are on all the time. Who knows, right? So I put in this coin, and it lights up, and it's like, I'm like thinking this is like a moment out of the movies. Like, this is going to be the moment that changes everything. And I'm like, it's just okay. It's just not that big a deal. I mean, it's a great sculpture, and, you should go see it if you get a chance. So you guys should definitely go see the sculpture. But it was just, it didn't solve everything. Because it turns out that going on a quest to see a sculpture is not going to solve everything in your life. It's not going to help you figure out what you want to do. So I walked out of the church, and I was kind of like, okay, now what? I'm almost out of money, like literally almost out of money, and I don't have a college degree other than my associate's degree, and I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I sit down on the front steps of the church, and I look down at the Colosseum, and I think, I like seeing old stuff. I should go to see some more old stuff. So I start thinking, like, well, what else is old? Like, what's older than the Colosseum? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you guys that's older than the Colosseum?
The planet.
Well, sure, the planet, but I was already there. What about you?
The only thing coming to my mind right now is me and Sarah watching a television show on Netflix called Alone.
Yeah.
And on the island in, I believe it was the Arctic, they had this slab of stone. I can't remember the stone's name. It's like the oldest.
Okay, so
oldest rock,
other than like geological features,
yeah,
it's hard to think of things that are older than the Colosseum, but there are things, right? So like the pyramids, for example, are significantly older, and I thought you guys would come up with that. Apparently college has gone downhill since I was in college. Maybe you're not history major, so what can I say, right? So I thought, okay, the pyramids are really old, so I'd like to see those. And then I went, well, actually I kind of like old, like ruiny stuff, so maybe I'll go see Machu Picchu, which is not as old as the Colosseum, but this is an Incan city on top of the mountains in Peru. And then I'll go see Petra in Jordan. So I just made this like little mental bucket list.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, now how am I going to get the money to go see those things? Because it's not free to do that. And I was like, well, my dad's a lawyer. I'll just be a lawyer, and then I'll make money, and I'll use the money to go see these old things. And that's pretty much my college career in a nutshell. I went back to college after I got back from Europe, and I did 2 years undergrad at a state school. Then I went to get an MBA, and then I went to law school, and then I became a lawyer, and I went to Egypt and to Jordan and Machu Picchu. So that's pretty much it.
Wow.
There's my whole life in a nutshell.
Now, how did that kind of transform into real estate? What kind of lawyer were you, and how was that process, and how did that kind of?
Yeah. So I started out as a general practitioner, so I did whatever came in the door.
Okay.
But I really focused on bankruptcy. That was the thing I did the most of. And this is 2000. I mean, I graduated from law school in 2007, so like it's a good time to start being a bankruptcy attorney. 2008, 2009, 2010. There's a lot of bankruptcy work, and this is up in Michigan. And it would have been fine. I had a television commercial. I hired another lawyer to work for me, and then I went to Machu Picchu. And this is August of 2008. I know that for sure because that was the last thing on the list. I went to Egypt when I was an undergrad, actually,
wow.
and I went to Petra with my wife after I graduated from law school. And so then the next year, I said, well, we got to go to Machu Picchu now. We have the money, we can go. And everything was going really well. And I went up to Machu Picchu, and I was feeling not great. I felt altitude sickness, out of shape. I couldn't breathe. I thought there's something wrong. I was like, at least I quit smoking. Like, it could have been worse, right? But I just like didn't feel great. And I came off the mountain. I mean, it's an amazing experience. I mean, people should go there. Came off the mountain, and I checked my voicemail because you had to, like, back then we didn't have international cell coverage. We had cell phones finally, but we didn't have cell coverage. So I called on a payphone to check my voicemail. And the one attorney that worked for me had put in his 2-week notice like 3 days before that. And I wasn't going to be home for like another 6-7 days. So I was going to have like 4 days to replace him, right? And I thought, well, that's inconvenient. I'm going to have to deal with that when I get home. and then, we did the rest of our trip, and I flew home, and I was feeling so crappy, like really, really bad. So I went to the med center. I didn't even have a doctor. I just went to the med center. And they were like, oh, you must have picked something up in the Amazon. So they gave me antibiotics. Didn't help. 2 days go by. Not, by the way, this 2 days put me Thursday to Saturday. That Saturday was the last day of his 2-week notice. So my other attorney is done working. I'm sick. And that Saturday I'm still sick. So I go back to the med center, and they do some blood work. And they say, well, we'll let you know when we find something out. And they just keep taking your antibiotics. You'll probably get better. I said, okay, but I feel really bad. I mean, I developed a weird lump on my stomach, and I thought I had picked up a parasite or something in the Amazon, and I'm like coughing, and I can't breathe. I like legitimately had pneumonia. They knew that for sure, but I felt like there was something else wrong. My vision was getting blurry. I mean, it wasn't great. But I went home, and I started watching Heroes on television. I don't know if you guys remember that show or not, but it's a dumb show, but it was a big show in 2008.
Yeah.
No one cares about it now. So I'm watching the show, and I get a phone call. Well, actually, my wife got a phone call. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and they asked to speak to me, and I'm like, okay. And I get the phone, and it's the doctor, and they've got my test results, and they said, listen, there's no easy way to tell you this, but you have leukemia, and you need to go to the hospital right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was running through your mind when you received that phone call?
I want to watch the rest of the episode of Heroes. So my wife says to me, she goes, what'd they want? I go, oh, let's just watch. There's 5 minutes left in the episode. I'm like, let's just watch the rest of the episode, But the problem is the doctor made me say, you have to repeat what I said, because they figured I was in shock, which I obviously was. And he said, do you understand what I'm saying? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, what did I say? And I go, you said I have to come to the hospital right now. And he's like, yeah, you do. which hospital are you coming to? And I told him, and he goes, okay, we're going to call ahead and make sure they're waiting for you. And so I knew it was serious, right? Because that's not a normal conversation. And of course, my wife heard me say, I have to go to the hospital right now, and what hospital to go to. So she's like, what did they say? And I'm like, let's just watch the rest of the show. Because I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to see the end of this episode for a long time. I just think it's going to be bad. And so then I'm like, okay, listen, I said that, for the first time ever. I said, these words out loud. I said, I have leukemia and we have to go to the hospital. And then she starts crying and freaking out like you do when you find out someone you love is sick. And I'm like, well, that's not working. I can't drive. I got to go to the hospital. And she can't drive because she's freaking out. So I called her dad. And I knew he was up because the weird part is, apparently my emergency contact was her dad and not her phone. So they had gotten her number from him. And my phone was dead. That's why they were calling him. So I call him and I'm like, hey, Dad, can you come over to the house a minute? And they live 3 miles from us back then. And he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, just come on over. I need you to come over here. Because I know if I tell him, he's going to freak out. So he gets over. And then, of course, he sees his daughter still crying and freaking out. And he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, okay. Promise me that you can keep yourself together, but I need to go to the hospital right now and I need you to drive us. And he's like, okay, why? And so then I go through this whole thing again, and predictably he freaks out. So go through this whole process. Finally he's calm enough. We spent a little time centering ourselves and praying and things like that. And then we got in the car and left. And then I did the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life, and that is call every single person I can think of and tell them this. Hey, Mom, I don't really know anything, but I'm on the way to the hospital. I have leukemia. I'll let you know more later. Bye. Hey, Dad. Hey, Bob, my brother, I'd be I'm calling everybody. For 20-minute drive to the hospital, I think I made 17 calls. Right? Just ran. And I'm not even telling him anything. I get my brother's voicemail. I'm like, hey, Bob, I'm on the way to the hospital. I have leukemia. I'm going to this hospital. I'll let you know something later. Bye. That's the voicemail. Wow. Don't do that. If you get leukemia, don't tell anybody until you know something. Bad idea. So I get to the hospital, and predictably, all of the people I call thought I only called them. So they all start showing up, right? So I'm in the I don't even have a room in the hospital. I'm in the a little tented emergency room triage center, and then my mom shows up, and my dad shows up, my brother shows up, my sister shows up, and my cousin shows up, and my friend shows up, and my brother's friend shows up, just random. There's 20 people in this little time. I mean, it's literally about the space that we're in right now, and my brother says to me, he says, why'd you call everyone? I go, I don't know. I just figured I'd tell a lot of people. Figured you want to know. But you could have stayed at the wedding you were at, because he was at a wedding. And he goes, I figured you're having a bad day. And I was like, it's not a bad day. I don't have bad days, because that's what I do. So that's it. That's what happened after college. And that's how I ended up getting out of law. This is a super long answer to your question, by the way. But the reality is, it really is, because I had 2 attorneys, and then I lost one, and then I lost another myself. I couldn't work, and the practice was in shambles by the time I got back to work. We were losing $5,000 or $6,000 a week for months, and we had tons of debt piled up, and I became the cliched bankruptcy attorney who ended up bankrupt because of it, because I didn't have any income coming in at all. And so that's how I got out of law. And that's what I did.
And you were still in Michigan at the time.
I was, yeah. So this is 2008. I was able to get all of my existing clients taken care of. And by 2010, I just had a pile of debt, but I was caught up on everything. And I was looking at the future, and the economy was very uncertain then. And I got a job offer, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in business debt, a lot of business debt. And I said, I'm never going to pay this off. It's not going to happen. I'm not making money. No one has any money to hire an attorney right now because the economy's terrible. And even though I was current on my mortgage and my credit cards, I owed, like, the minimum payments were thousands of dollars a month, right? Like, it was getting bad. And so I had no choice. And I just said, oh, I guess I'm done. And the thing is, when you're a bankruptcy attorney and you file bankruptcy, there's no law that says you have to quit practicing law, but kind of feels like it. You know,
Yeah.
like you go in front of people that you work with, that you literally have been in front of hundreds of times in your professional capacity, and go, I'm out of money. See ya. And I just took a job down in Chattanooga, and that's how I ended up down here. I do want to circle back on one thing, though, if it's all right with you.
Absolutely.
So I said this thing about my brother in the emergency room, going like I figured you're having a bad day, and I kind of went like, no, I don't have bad days, right? Because that's sort of my thing. So say like 13 years before that, when I was 17, I made a decision to give up bad days. One day I just went, I'm not going to have bad days anymore. It didn't actually work, by the way, just to be clear. Turns out you don't get to just go, I'm not going to have bad days anymore, and that solves it. But it actually does in a way. I was doing positive affirmations back then. I would say, today's a good day, today's a good day, today's a good day, over and over again. I didn't know it was called a positive affirmation because, like, YouTube didn't exist. I mean, literally didn't exist. Like, Google hadn't even been founded yet then. So I didn't have any way to know what this was, but it's just what I said. I said, look, I'm 17, I'm healthy, I live in America, like, it can't be that bad. Like, I'm just gonna have a good day. And I kept saying that over and over again, and I just believed that if I convinced myself I was having a good day, I would. And if you think about this objectively, somewhere in the world today, someone's having the worst day they've ever had. But somewhere else in the world, someone's having the best day they ever had. So the day really isn't good or bad. It's really like a subjective interpretation of how your day is going that determines whether it's good or bad. So the idea that you can convince yourself you're having a good day is actually exactly accurate. If you can get your subconscious mind to believe it's a good day, for you, it actually is a good day. And I think what my brother was saying that day in the hospital was like, you just got diagnosed with leukemia, like, nice try, buddy. You can't always have good days. And I was literally thinking, like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't get diagnosed till 10 o'clock at night. Like, 22 hours of the day were actually pretty good. Like, I wasn't feeling 100%, but I got to watch Heroes, right? So it could have been worse. And then I'm in the hospital, and all these people are showing up, and they obviously care about me. That's why they're there. And I was like, I feel loved right now. So this is a good day. Yes, I would rather not have leukemia, but it's not that bad. Like, it could be worse. I could be dead. I mean, my wife could have leukemia. That would have been worse for me. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but when you feel that way, that's what you feel. And so that day wasn't too bad. And the next day was actually a much harder day because, then I knew I had leukemia the whole day. And then eventually my people went home. They weren't all there. And I had this time by myself. And I was like, ooh. Gotta get used to this. I've got leukemia, and I'm probably gonna die, because that's the other thing. Like, my dad came into the hospital that first night, and he said, if you live till February, I'll take you to Australia. And by the way, this is in September, right? So this is not like a long period of time. And I was like, I just hope I make it till Christmas, because I didn't know anything about how leukemia worked, except for, like, your white blood cells are supposed to be like between 4 and 10,000. And mine were 258,000.
Wow.
I had a cousin, Kimberly, who died a few years before I was diagnosed with leukemia. And when she died, her white blood cell count was 150,000. So I was like double as bad as her. And this is why I felt like crap, frankly. And so I just assumed I was going to die. I mean, no one told me that. There wasn't like a doctor that said, like, you have no chance you're going to die. But, like, for 4 days, every nurse, every doctor I saw treated me like I was on the way out. They didn't say it, but you could tell by the way they were acting. And I know this because the next day, when I was sitting there by myself in the hospital, there was a shift change around 2 p.m. And this new nurse came in. And she looked at me and she said, oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry that you're here. And I was like, oh my God, Shelly, I'm so happy I'm here, because this was like a babysitter of mine I hadn't seen in 20 years, right? And I was like, literally like excited by it. And she was like, you are insane. You should be upset about this. And I'm like, no, it's so great to see you. And that was enough to like shift that day for me into a good day. And the next day something else positive happened. And the thing is, that's how it works. Good stuff happens to everyone every day. Bad stuff happens to everyone every day. Some days more bad stuff happens than good stuff, right? And a lot of people will say, well, that's a bad day. And my argument is, no, it's still your perspective that matters. So for me, seeing Shelly was enough to outweigh leukemia. And you might say, well, listen, leukemia is really bad, right? And seeing your old babysitters, it's nice, but it's not as good relative to really bad. But the thing is, it's not how it felt at the time, and that's really what matters. So if you're going to give up bad days, it's what your subjective opinion that matters. And when I look back at it, I was right, because that probably was the best day of my life, like objectively the best day of my life, because that's when I went, I don't really like being a lawyer. I'm just doing this so I can make money to travel. I need to find something else out to do. And I set myself on a course that ended up in Chattanooga, that ended up in a situation where I don't have to work at all and I have time freedom. I ended up in a situation where a former guest of yours said that they want to be like me, right? Like Eddie Bodkin. I saw him on your show and I was like, you're insane, Eddie. Like, you shouldn't want to be me. Like, that means you have leukemia and, you might die. But, like, hey, it's been a decade. I'm still here, so it could be worse.
Yeah, so there's a thing I actually heard this morning. I want to say Brad Lee said it, but it sort of goes with the no bad days thing. He said, if someone offered you, or would you accept $1 million if you knew you wouldn't wake up tomorrow?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely not.
Yeah,
right?
And then would you accept 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion if you knew you were going to wake up?
See, I love that. Brad Lee's an interesting character.
Yeah, so
but that's exactly
waking
right.
up is worth way more than $1 billion to you.
You can't buy time.
Alive.
You cannot buy time. And that's the best part about real estate investing, actually, is you actually can buy your time back, right? Like, you don't get new time, but you can stop spending your time going to work. You can stop spending your time doing things that you don't love to do, and you can have the freedom. And that's really what Eddie was talking about, right? Is he wants to be able to take off and go to Puerto Rico for a month, like I did a couple months ago, or go to Europe for a month, or go to Africa for a month, like I did in 2020 when I climbed Kilimanjaro. Like, that was an expensive trip. I mean, I'm going to Antarctica, for crying out loud. Like, next year in January, I'm literally going to Antarctica. Like, who goes to Antarctica, right?
Yeah.
Me. I do, because I want to. And I saw all those things that I saw before, but I was like trying to fit them in between, like, cases and like jobs and stuff. When I went to Peru, it was like I had to be stressed about what was happening at work. And now if I want to go to Peru, I don't go like, I'm going to go for 8 days and like squeeze in everything I want to see in Peru like we did then. I'd be like, I think I'll spend a month and a half in South Africa or South America, and while I'm there, I'll go to Peru and Bolivia and wherever else I want to go. No, I still have to do some work. I don't want to imply that I don't do anything, but the reality is I have a way more flexibility. I can run my business from anywhere. If I don't want to do anything for a week or 2 or 3, it's fine. Business will still be there when I get back.
Absolutely. And I think it's so powerful, Jeff, when you talked about practicing positive affirmations and just stacking gratitude and getting yourself out of that really down point in your life and taking it to where you are today. And just,
25 years, man.
Really reflecting gratitude to everyone you speak with, the people listening this right now. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, 25 years without a bad day. And it literally started by just one day. I was feeling sad. I broke up with my girlfriend when I was 17 or whatever. And I just went, this is dumb. I shouldn't be sad. Like, I should just be happy. And then what happens is there's this thing that Tony Robbins talks about all the time, the reticular activating system. And there's this thing called the Bader-Meinhof effect. They're essentially the same thing, but it's basically like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden it seems like everyone has that car. Or if you're thinking about buying a Tesla, now you see Teslas everywhere, that kind of stuff. It's not that there's more than there were before. It's that your subconscious mind defaults to what you're familiar with. So my subconscious mind, it defaults to positive. Like, you punch me in the face, I'll be like, cool, I got a new story. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm going to be like. Let me tell you about the time I was on a podcast and the guy just hauled off and punched me in the face. That would make some golden material for the future. And so like earlier this year, I got diagnosed with melanoma. Like that's bad luck. 2 cancers. Like you don't want 2 cancers. Like one's bad, but you can beat one. But like I don't know very many people that have multiple cancers and stick around. I'm hoping I can do it, but you know what I thought to myself? This is going to be awesome. I'm going to tell those guys at UTC about it on a podcast, and I'm going to be like, you want to see the scar? Like where they cut the cancer cells out? Because the reality is like we're all going to have this stuff happen. So, you know, whatever bad happens to you, you know, you break up with your girlfriend, you get cancer, you know, you lose your arm. It doesn't really matter what it is. It sucks. Yeah. But like, so you guys know Hal Elrod, the Miracle Morning guy? Yeah. So Hal Elrod writes this book, Miracle Morning. It's a great book. People should read it. But there's also like this quote that I love that he says. And he says, the moment you accept 100% responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life. Wow. So I think that's like, that's the secret, right? Like I could have gone, oh man, this is so unfair. I have leukemia. Like, woe is me. Oh man, this is terrible. Or I can be like, I got to take responsibility for where I am. It's like when you're dealt a bad hand in poker, you don't go, this is unfair. I mean, you might be irritated by it, and I was irritated. I'd rather not have leukemia. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather not have melanoma. I don't now. We cut it out. But I'd rather not get it again, right? If I get it again, I'll be pissed. But I also will be like, what do I got to do to fix this, right? Like, what can I do? So when I got leukemia, I asked my doctor, I said, hey, doc, like, if you were 30 and had this exact type of leukemia, the type I have is rare. It's less rare now, but it was pretty rare then, and it's particularly rare in people under 50, and I was 30, right? So 43 now, so 13 years. And the 5-year survival rate was like 5%. And I said, listen, if you've got this exact cancer and you're 30 years old, what doctor would you talk to? Because I want a second opinion. Right? I go, nothing against you, but like, who would you go to if you were in my exact situation? He goes, oh, there's a lot of good doctors. I go, no. Who would you go to? Like, who would you go to? And he goes, well, if I could go anywhere. I go, yeah, that's the one I want. Anywhere. He goes, well, if I could go anywhere, I would go to MD Anderson and talk to this particular doctor, Susan O'Brien, who's the leading clinical researcher for the type of treatment that I'm recommending to you, and she's the expert on this disease. And I go, okay, I'm going to go see her. And he goes, I don't think she's taking new patients. I'm like, I'm going to go see her. You know, and you know what I did? I went and saw her. And you know what she told me? Oh, your doctor's doing exactly what I would do. And I go, oh, that was a waste of time. But the point is, I took responsibility for it. I said, you know what? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's my fault, because that's different than responsibility. And I didn't know who Hal Elrod was then, let alone know that quote, but the reaction's the same. You're dealt whatever you're dealt. Like, take responsibility and do whatever the best thing you can possibly do in the situation you're in.
Yeah. You'd be so much happier if you focus on the things that you can change.
Yeah.
If you only focus on the things you can change.
Buddha says that, actually. So I'm not a Buddhist, but there's this quote I like from Buddha, and I'm going to butcher it, but like the general idea of it is that it's about worrying, but it applies to this as well. It's like you shouldn't worry, because if whatever you're worrying about, if it's something that you cannot change, there's no point in worrying. And if it's something you can change, you should just go change it. Right? Like, those are your options. Like if you can't change it, just don't worry about it, because it doesn't do any good, right? It's going to either happen or it's not. And then that's how leukemia is. Like, if you get leukemia, don't like sit around and be like, oh man, that's I'm going to worry, I might get leukemia. Like, don't worry if you're going to get leukemia, because you either are or you aren't. But if you know that like smoking increases your chance of getting lung cancer, and you've got like family members that have lung cancer, so you got a medical history for it, like you shouldn't worry about getting lung cancer. You should just quit smoking. Yeah. Like, it's not that complicated, and you can apply that to almost anything in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I absolutely love the conversation that we're having right now. But I guess switching back over to you getting started
Sure.
into real estate, I guess just kind of take us to your first deal and kind of how that process was and what struggles you had.
So I moved down here in December of 2010, in like May of 2011, I had no credit and very little money because I just come out of a bankruptcy, but I had gotten a pretty good job. That's one value of having education. So I got a good job working in transportation, and part of that I got a signing bonus, so I had a little bit of cash. And the real estate market was dicey in 2011. I mean, you guys are a little young to remember that, but it was dicey. And there was this condo in Rochester, Michigan, which is over by Detroit, but it's like a rich suburb of Detroit, that was a bank-owned foreclosure. And I think it was like the mortgage on the foreclosure was like $110,000, and the bank was selling it for $35,000, right? So it was like previously they thought it was worth enough to put a $105,000 mortgage on, and now a few years later they're selling it for 30, right? 35. And so my partner Travis called me up, and he said, because I'd been telling him, hey, I've got like a little bit of money saved up, like $20,000, like let's find something to buy together. He had some other real estate and stuff as a guy I knew from law school, and he said, I got this bank-owned condo we can buy for $30,000. I've talked him down to $30,000, and I think it's a really good investment. And I go, okay, let's do it. So we each put in $17,500 because we need to do a light renovation on it. And then remember, I literally had like $19,800 to my name, and I owed $100,000 in student loans, so I was actually negative $80,000 in net worth. And I'm like, hey Becky, that's my wife. I go, hey Becky, like I'm gonna take all of our money and I'm gonna buy this condo in Detroit. And you know, when you grew up in West Michigan like we did, Detroit is like it's like saying I'm gonna go buy a condo in Memphis. You're like, no, don't do that. That's a bad idea, right? If you grew up in Chattanooga, you're like, I don't want to even go to Memphis, right? That's what it was like. And you know, so we're looking at that, and I said, well, you know, Travis wants to do it. And she goes, oh, Travis is involved? I go, yeah. She goes, all right, let's do it. She doesn't care after that because she trusts Travis. But she did say this. She said, if this deal doesn't work out, we're never investing in real estate again because we can't afford to lose money again. So this is one time. You better make sure it works out. And fortunately, it worked out. So that's where I'm at. So we bought it for cash, and we rented it out for like $700. I think it was like $600 a month back then. But you know, we didn't know anything on it, and condo fee was like $150. So it cash flowed right out of the gate, and we were off to the races.
Awesome. So how long did it take to go from the condo single family into multifamily? Was it a pretty quick transition?
No, that was 2011. No. I bought my first multifamily, other than like a couple of duplexes here and there. I bought my first multifamily in 2017. Oh, after I quit working, yeah. So we bought like about 50 single-family residences between 2011 and 2017. The company I worked for was selling out to a bigger company, and they offered me a job or severance. I was like, I don't want to work for a big company. I don't even really want to work for anybody, right? Like I was back to the freedom thing. Like the whole reason I was moving here was so I could make more money temporarily and divert money to real estate so that I could get out of having to work for someone else. And so, well, I wasn't quite ready for that. I was thinking, hey, 6 months severance, that sounds pretty good. I'll take that and I'll figure it out. And I took my severance check and I bought a duplex and we did a BRRRR on it. And I took the money from that and I pooled it with some money my dad had, and we went and bought a 12 unit. So October of 17, about 4 months after I quit working, was when we bought the first multifamily. The second one was a 19 unit that we bought in November of 17. That one, we sold some houses that we had and we 1031'd over to that. And that was with my partner Travis, and it was because I was like, we should buy multifamily. And he's like, maybe, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I'm doing it anyway. So I bought the 12 unit, and then I think when I put that under contract, he was like, wait a minute, you can't buy a 12 unit. I can buy a 19 unit. Let's go buy this. It was like competitive, right? Which was great for me because then it's like I'm getting both. So I ended up with a third of each because we had another partner up on the other one. My dad had 2/3 of this one because I didn't have enough money to do the 12 unit. And we actually just sold it. So like the 12 unit, the first one I ever bought, we paid $635,000 for it. We sold it this summer for $1,150,000. So we never put any more money in it. I mean, we put a little bit in, but like only out of cash flows. And so we did pretty well. And we 1031 in that into a 30,000 square foot retail shopping center in Eastridge. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's where my severance is. It's a 30,000 square foot. That's another thing about investing is it's crazy how that, if you trace it, like how fast it can add up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned that you pretty much had a piece of every deal and you had a bunch of partners involved. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions we wanted to ask was, what are some of the good traits of a good business partner, a good long-term business partner?
Yeah, they need to own a property management company. That's my number one requirement. I'm joking, but it's also true. My primary partners both own property management companies. I have one partner here, Brian, who's on my show, the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show. He owns First Property Management in Chattanooga here, and I partner with him on stuff here. And then Travis owns a management company called Coast to Coast Management in Detroit, and I partner with him there. And I don't buy anything unless I'm partnering with one of them. So everything I've ever done has been a partnership. Now, I told you guys right beforehand that I have a duplex under contract, and I was going to buy that myself. That's actually why I put it under contract, and I went, I should probably find someone to partner with. So I'm bringing in a friend of mine, and he does not own a property management company. So for the first time in history, I'll have a partner that doesn't have a property management company.
Yeah, awesome.
What standards and values do you like to have with your partners going in investments?
Yeah, so listen, I mean, we have two different levels of partners. So I have my primary partners, Travis and Brian, who are both, people that I've known a long time, that I have really good relationships with, and I trust implicitly, and we have different skill sets. So that's another thing that's important. Like, I am better at like creative deal structures and things like that, I think, than either of them, but they're much better at the operational stuff than I am, right? So when we combine those two skill sets, it really helps. But then we have other partners that are like sort of, everything from like limited partners in the syndication where someone just gives us money and we give them a return, to like partners that partner with us. So like Travis and I do some deals with my dad once in a while. Brian and I do some deals with my dad. Well, my dad's technically a full active partner in the deal. He's not as involved as we are, right? And he's not in every deal. Like I do a lot more deals with Travis or Brian than I do with my dad, or with like some other random person. Like we have one deal, a 16-unit building that Brian and I bought, where we brought in two people and they each bought 10% of the deal, and we did 40% each. Right? It's not actually a syndication. We're all active, but we have the majority interest in it, so we have effective control over the deal. And so those kind of partners, what I'm looking for in them is I feel it's like being married to them. Like you're stuck with them long term, so they got to be easy to work with, and we have to have really clear expectations of who's doing what and when and why, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So one of the biggest things with this podcast is that it's educational, and we have a lot of student listeners.
Sure.
So you mentioned syndication, and that is a topic that has not come up in a podcast yet. So would you mind explaining what a syndication is?
So syndication can be really anything, but the classic definition of it is pooling money to buy something. So like technically, if you and I want to buy like a coffee cup, and we're going to each put in 50 cents to buy a coffee cup, that's a syndication, right? But the way it's used in the real estate context is there are very few people that have the money to buy a 100-unit apartment complex just on their own, right? So they're going to use some selection of capital. A big chunk of it's going to be bank financing, but another part of that capital stack is going to be equity that's brought in by the investors. Well, if you don't have, let's say it's a $10 million deal and you need $2 million for a down payment. Well, if you only have, $1 million, you can partner with someone and each put in $1 million. That's a traditional joint venture partnership. But the other option would be to raise the money from outside investors, people that aren't really active, and they're called limited partners, or really they're non-active investors. And when you do that, you have to be really careful, because there's security law that basically what the Securities and Exchange Commission has said is that if you take money from somebody and they're investing more really in you than in the deal, they're trusting that you're going to put in some effort and give them a return, then what you're really selling is a security and not real estate. And what a security is, it's like a stock, right? Like technically, Coca-Cola is a syndication. It's a syndication of a whole bunch of people that own pieces of the company, right? And those syndicated investors own it collectively, and there's a board of trustees, or whatever it is, a CEO, all these people that run the company. And in order for them to sell shares, they have to register that with the SEC and go through a whole process. And it's the same thing in real estate. If you want to sell shares in a real estate company, you have to register with the SEC and go through a process. But there are some exemptions to that. You also have to have a securities license to sell shares. You can't I can't sell you shares in Nike. You have to go buy them on like an exchange from a securities broker, right? But with real estate, there are some exceptions, and these apply to things outside of real estate too, but there's various rules that say, look, if you have a pre-existing relationship with your investors, and they're sophisticated enough to understand what's going on, you can pool their money together. So like you guys, we've known each other for a while. I could say, hey, Tim, Nick, let's go buy an apartment complex together, and you guys could give me money and I could go do the work, and we could make that work. But in order to make sure that that's legitimate, the SEC does still require some effort on our part. We have to file some stuff with them and give them notice and make sure you guys have had adequate disclosures of the risk involved. And that's where, securities attorney is really going to be important. But that's really what a syndication is. It's just pooling your money together to buy something perhaps bigger than any one of you could buy on your own. And you just got to be really careful you do it legal. So, get a securities attorney. Don't just try to do it on your own. It's not a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you. I love when I catch a new term that hasn't come up yet, so Thank you for explaining.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome.
Hopefully it was an adequate explanation. Now, while I am an attorney, I'm not a securities attorney, and I'm definitely not representing anyone in this room or watching the show, for that matter, because I don't practice law anymore, and I haven't since 2010. So
yeah, important disclaimer.
Yeah, might as well throw it in there.
Yeah.
What's the greatest lesson that you've learned investing in real estate?
Listen, the most important lesson I've learned is not a real estate lesson, but if you want to limit it to real estate, it's just do it.
Yeah.
It's the Nike thing, right? I got this band. I was at an event like a couple weeks ago, a real estate networking event, and somebody was handing these out. It says ready, fire, aim, right? Not ready, aim, fire. It's like ready, fire, aim. And I'm wearing it because it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, even more than the Hal Elrod one. There's a Richard Branson quote where he says the difference between successful people and those who never succeed is that successful people take action before they have all the possible information. So if I could go back in time and avoid bankruptcy, the way that I would do it would be to buy real estate when I was 19 and not when I was 30, right? Or 32 or 3, whatever I was when I first bought real estate. And the thing is, I told you at the beginning that when I was 15, I would sneak out of my room and watch late night television shows about real estate. So I already knew I wanted to buy real estate when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when it came out when I was 18 or 19. So I had this idea that I wanted to be a real estate investor, and I kept saying, well, I'm going to do it once I learn more, once I get out of school, once I have more money, once I do this. But if I could go back and do it again, I'd say don't wait, just do it. Just get out there, buy some real estate, and don't worry if you don't know everything. Like do your due diligence. I'm not. This is not a justification to just gamble, right? But you're not gonna know everything. It's not possible. There's always going to be something else you can learn. And I've met people that are 70 years old and have been going to real estate networking events since they were in their 20s and have never bought real estate because they're still trying to learn. I got to learn more. I got to go to this course. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on education. And that's not necessary. There's something wrong with education. I spend a lot of money on education. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, in fact. But you know why I can afford to do that? Because I have a lot of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I guess kind of giving the listeners a kind of view of your portfolio today.
Sure.
And also your end goal, kind of after that, tying that in there.
Yeah, I don't have an end goal. I just like real estate. So, my goal was to first replace my income so I could live without working. I did that a long time ago. And so the end goal is just, I want to help people. That's my passions now are around helping people invest in real estate, education. That's why I do my podcasts. Both the real estate one and the non-real estate one are really about helping people live the best possible version of their life that they can. So that's the end goal, is just keep doing that. But the portfolio now, I mean, we have around 270 apartments and single-family houses, primarily in joint ventures. So, we own a big chunk of it. See, when you get into the syndication world, you have these real estate investors that, maybe they put deals together, but there's a huge group of people, and then they raise a whole bunch of money. And so, you might have a guy say, I have 1,000 units, but they own like 1% of 1,000 units. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a strategy. But I feel that, for me, I'd rather have a bigger chunk. So my average ownership's around a third, maybe a little bit under, like 30 to 35%, somewhere in that range, of those units. And then I have 2 office buildings, as the strip mall that I'm about to buy, and then I have another strip mall up in Michigan as well. That's about it for real estate. But I guess that's a few dollars worth of real estate. And we'll have some more. I mean, my goal this year is to borrow $10 million. I don't care what I buy with it. I just want to borrow $10 million. That's because, and that's a weird way to look at it, but that's how I look at it. Yeah. I figure banks make sure they only loan me money on stuff that works. I mean, that's like actually the reality. So as long as the bank will loan me the money, it's not so bad. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not a justification for not doing your due diligence. But right now, money is super cheap. You can borrow money for 3.5% or less, right? That's really cheap. It's never been that cheap for commercial debt ever. Like, some people borrow in the 2s for commercial debt now, depending on what kind of asset class they're looking at and what kind of debt they're getting. Inflation, it came out yesterday, 5.1% annualized. This has never happened before. Inflation is higher than the cost of borrowing money. So based on that, I could literally borrow $10 million and buy $10 million worth of toilet paper, wait a year, sell it, and come out ahead because they're paying me to borrow money. They're literally loaning me money at a rate that's lower than the rate of inflation. It's never happened before, so I want to borrow as much as I can. 10 million is a stretch goal. I don't know if I'll make it, but we have $8 million worth of real estate under contract right now, so that'll be $6 million in debt right there. And we've already bought 100 units this year. And that's another few million in debt. So if everything plays out the way it is, we're going to hit our $10 million new debt goal for the year. And we're going to have the benefit of appreciation, but we're also going to have the benefit of the spread between inflation and our cost of funds. And I feel like that's like a free gift from the banks, from the economy, from the Federal Reserve for artificially suppressing interest rates of like a couple $100,000 a year for 20 or 30 years, depending on the financing terms we get. And I don't see why you wouldn't want to borrow as much money. I mean, Dave Ramsey's probably mad at me for saying it. So Dave, I'm sorry, man. Like, you're wrong. Borrow money. It's the way to wealth. And it really is. I mean, there's 4 ways you make money in real estate. That's it. There's 4. It's not 50. There's 4. I know people are like, well, what about wholesaling? What about flipping? Well, yeah, but it's all the same thing. At the end of the day, you make money in real estate by cash flow, appreciation, amortization, which is debt pay down, and the tax advantages. And that's it. There's no other way to make money. Like, flipping is just a way to force appreciation, right? Mm-hmm. So that flipping, wholesaling, that's appreciation. That's a buying it right. I mean, that's just buying below market value. That's cool, but you don't make money that way. You're just getting a deal, right? Like, that's cool. I mean, but then you're going to flip that contract, and you've got appreciation because of your knowledge. But one of the 4 is amortization gains. That's debt pay down, someone else paying your mortgage. So, I mean, if you're not borrowing, I mean, you're throwing away a quarter of your possible returns, and the easiest one to control because it stays the same. And the great part about debt is, man, if you borrow, it's the best hedge against inflation. If inflation keeps going up, you're going to pay it back with even cheaper dollars, right? If inflation goes to 10% or 20%, or the value of the dollar cuts in half, you still owe the same amount of dollars. So, man, I want to borrow a whole bunch of money and then hope inflation goes up like crazy. And the way they're spending, could happen. Yeah.
Can we talk about the tax benefits? I know you have some experience with depreciation
Sure.
and tax savings in that sense with cost segregations.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the short version is, since 2017, when I started buying multifamily, I paid $0 in federal tax. Zero. I make money, but my tax returns show I lose money every single year, and a lot. When President Trump had his tax returns revealed, and people were mad that he paid $750 in tax, and he's a billionaire. Whether he is or not, we don't know, but because we haven't seen his financials, but we know that he paid $750 in tax. I thought everyone else is like, "This is outrageous. He should have paid way more," and I'm like, "Why did he pay that much?" That's my answer, right?
It's a filing fee.
Like what kind of real estate investor pays tax? Because the truth is, if you know how to follow the rules, and I'm not saying commit tax fraud. What I'm saying is like, there's a rich dad tax advisor, Tom Wheelwright. Have you guys read his book, Tax Free Wealth? Get this book, read it. Tax Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. So Tom Wheelwright says, if you want to change your tax, change your facts, right? He points out that the tax code is not designed to raise money. The tax code is designed to manipulate behavior. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, I'm not giving like tax advice, but if you think about it, it makes sense, right? If they just wanted to raise money, they would just print more money. They do that anyway. They can print as much money as they want. They don't need to take Tim's money to get more money. They just print as much money as they want. The only reason to take your money is to convince you to do something differently, right? So they encourage you to buy real estate and get tax write-offs. Just like they encourage you to get married so you can get a homestead credit, right? Or have children so you can get a child tax care credit, right? Stuff like that. They're trying to encourage certain behaviors by the tax code, penalize certain behaviors by taxing them more heavily. So like if you run a coal plant, you pay a whole bunch of extra tax because they want to have less people producing carbon. That's a carbon tax. And that's why like the environmentalists are like we need carbon taxes, right? Because they don't want carbon taxes to raise money. They want carbon taxes to cut down on carbon production, right? That's how the whole tax code is actually set up. So one of the things the federal government wants us to do is to provide high quality, low cost, affordable housing to people that need it. So they encourage us. So they create things like tax credits for developing new low income housing credits, right? But they also have this thing called cost segregation, which is about depreciation. So the short version of depreciation, in case you need a definition for your audience, is that that the IRS has determined that buildings go down in value over time, that they lose value because they're wearing out. Now we all know that real estate goes up, right? I mean, it tends to go up, but it does make sense, right? If you build a building, it's only going to last so long unless you put money back into it. So the IRS says that residential property lasts 27 and a half years. Now, we all know that's a made-up number. Like, if you build a house today, it's probably going to be around longer than 27 and a half years. I mean, there are houses that are 100 years old, for crying out loud, all over the place, right? But the IRS says, hey, it's worth 27 and a half years, and then it's worth nothing, right? That's their determination. So what it is they say if you buy a piece of real estate, say, just to make the math really easy, let's say you buy a $120,000 house. $20,000 is the value of the land in my made-up hypothetical. The house is worth $100,000. They say you can take 27 and a half. You take 100,000 divided by, that was actually terrible math because it's not easy to do this math, but you take $100,000, you divide it by 27 and a half, and each year you can write off 127 and a half of $100,000, which is about $4,000 a year. Let's just say it's around there, right? So if I make $4,000 in income on that property after all of my expenses, right, interest expense plus management expenses, whatever, and I get a $4,000 depreciation allowance, that $4,000 depreciation allowance is counted as a non-cash loss. So I didn't lose any cash, but the IRS says I lost money. They let me write that off, and that's one of the ways they encourage people to buy rental properties. They want people to invest in other businesses as well, like commercial properties, but they don't want it as much, and we know that because they say commercial properties depreciate over 40 years instead of 27 and a half. They're like, we want to encourage it, but we want to more encourage apartments and houses, right? And so that's essentially what depreciation is. What happened in 2017 is the Trump tax code came out. The Trump tax code said, any depreciation that you're allowed, that's property that would depreciate under 15 years or less, can be taken in the first year. I'm not a tax expert at all, but certain property has different depreciation, much like commercials, 40 years, residential's 27 and a half. Parking lots are 15-year property. Don't know why, but the IRS says if you put in a parking lot, you can take that as a write-off over 15 years. So if I go build a new parking lot, I don't get to write off the whole thing the first year. I write off 1/15 of it the first year. So if it's a $15,000 parking lot, I get a $1,000 write-off every year for 15 years. Well, under the new tax code, they said for a period of time starting in October 1 of 2027 and continuing until, I think, September 30 of 2024, you can take 100% of anything that's 15-year property or less, so 3, 5, and 7-year property as well, in the first year as a write-off. So this is where tax gets a little complicated, but a cost segregation study, which is when you have an engineer come in and look at your property, can determine what the value of your parking lot is. So when I buy an apartment complex, I hire an engineer. The engineer comes down and he says, you know, you paid $2 million for this apartment complex and it has $100,000 worth of parking lots and only $1.9 million worth of other stuff. And, you know, and they'll say the land's worth $200,000 and the building's worth, you know, $700,000 and the cabinets are worth $200,000. And they break it all into these categories. And then I can go to the IRS and say, look, engineer told me this is what it's worth. And that means I can write off the cabinets and the floors and the parking lots and in the first year, because that's what they're encouraging us to invest. It's another incentive to invest in that type of asset. And we do that. We do a cost segregation study, and we're seeing about 25 to 30% of our purchase price as a first-year write-off. That becomes very, very significant when you have to put 20% down. So you buy a $2 million building, you put $400,000 down, and you get, let's call it $500,000 in write-offs. So a bigger write-off than you actually have. So if you made $500,000 that year, you could put $400,000 down on an apartment complex, put $100,000 in your savings account, right, and spend it for whatever you want, and not pay tax on any of it. No, there's downsides because you have a lower basis, so you get lower depreciation moving forward. But you know, the thing with taxes, the longer you push it out, the better. And if you do this long enough, and then you use things like 1031 exchanges, which allow you to trade one property for another without having a taxable event, you can push that tax obligation out pretty much forever. The goal is to push your taxes out forever and then die. Because once you die, your heirs don't pay tax either, because you get a stepped up basis and you get to start over.
That's awesome.
So that's my strategy. Now, it won't work forever because they're phasing out the bonus depreciation, but the cost segregations are still worth doing on any property that's like $500,000 or more, because it costs money to have an engineer come out and do that study. But if you do the study, you're going to get a huge tax benefit. I mean, obviously, it's only worth it if you're going to keep the property for more than a few years. You don't want to do it if you're going to sell next year. It doesn't work for that kind of stuff. But if people have questions about that, they could certainly reach out to me. We actually have a couple of websites set up to help people learn about cost segregations now. We've done a whole episode on our show about it. So,
awesome. And just kind of diving into that, would you tell the listeners what kind of resources and different podcasts they can...
Sure. So for cost segregations in general, I really like this company. It's called Core Solutions Group out of Michigan. I'm sure they have a website, but we actually made a website called oldfashionedtaxsavings.com. So oldfashionedtaxsavings.com, they can just go there and they can get, if they go there, they can get a free benefit analysis, so they can put in the information about their property, and somebody from Core will call them directly and tell them how much they're going to save and what it's going to cost. It won't be exactly accurate because they have to send the engineer out to get the final report done, but it will be like, we think you're going to save about this much in tax, and it'll cost you about this much to do it. And so it's a really easy decision for people. So if you buy real estate, go to oldfashionedtaxsavings.com. It's like the first thing you should do right after you buy it. Go find out if you can save some more money. Or even do it before. You can just give them the information ahead of time, and they can give you a projection of what it'll be. So that's, for that, that's where I would go. Obviously, I like my podcast, the best of all podcasts, even better than yours. And I have two of them. One's Old Fashioned Real Estate. And that show, we just drink bourbon old fashions. like we get drunk and talk about real estate. Yeah. That's best on YouTube because it's more fun if you can see us getting drunk, but we're on all the podcasting apps and stuff too. And then for other real estate podcasts, I mean, there's so many of them. So many of them. Yours is actually very good. I mean, I've really been enjoying it.
Thank you.
And so people should continue to watch this one. But I mean, you've got all the big name ones like Bigger Pockets and stuff like that. But you know, there's so many like good ones. It's just you can find a real estate podcast that specializes in senior living developments or raising money. I mean, there's a Capital Raiser show is really good. There's the Whitney Sewell has a show that's all about real estate syndication. I've been on his show. That one he does every single day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, every single day.
We just booked him yesterday.
Oh, cool. He's a great guy. You'll like him on the show. You'll really enjoy him. He's a good guest. And he's just a really good guy. I don't know how he does a show every day. I mean, it's insane to me. It's so much work. Doing 2 shows, and we only release one of them once every other week, and one a week. So I'm doing like 6 shows a month. That's a lot of shows for me. So doing one every single day, 30 a month, it's insane. But yeah, so you guys will like having him on the show. His show's really good. I don't know. I mean, there's so many of them. Like you could find a show about anything really. Vinny Chopra's got a pretty good show too. I don't know if you've seen his. I've been on 2 out of his 4 shows. That's another guy that does way too much stuff. 4 shows. Who has 4 shows? And then when I was on his show last time, he said to me, you know, I really like your mindset. Maybe we should do a Mindset Monday show with Jeff and Vinny. And I'm like, Vinny, like you already have 4 shows. Like I'm not going to do it. I have 2 shows, you have 4 shows. That's enough between the 2 of us. Yeah. My other show, by the way, is not a real estate show, but it's called Last Life Ever. Yeah. And it's just about, like I said, living the best version of your life that you can. So
it's awesome.
I like it.
It's awesome. And kind of one of the last questions for you. It's a new question that we'll ask, but what is a book that you give more than any other book?
That I give?
Yeah, gift.
Gift, yeah, no, I get that. I give away Rich Dad Poor Dad all the time, so that's the clear winner on that. But actually, that Tax-Free Wealth book, I've given that away a couple times recently too, the Tom Wheelwright one, because I keep running into this guy, so I keep getting signed copies of his book, so I keep giving him away. And because he's like a good guy, but I don't need like 3 copies of his book signed, because they're not like, it's not like they're worth a lot, you know. But Rich Dad Poor Dad, I give away the most. The book I recommend the most recently, actually, is Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't give it away because I only have it on Audible, but it's a great book. People should read that. It's a real estate book, too. People don't realize that. That's how he made his money. I mean, he made money acting. I don't mean to say that, but his first $1 million, he made it in apartments.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, most people don't. And that's a mindset book more than a real estate book, actually. And this guy, like, he's 15 years old and he doesn't speak English, and one of his friends has a magazine, like a weightlifting magazine, and he sees this guy on the cover that's really muscular looking with a hot blonde chick, and he says, who's that? And the guy goes, oh, that's Mr. Universe. And he goes, I will be Mr. Universe. He's 15. He's never lifted a weight in his life. He's a scrawny little kid in like the hill country of Austria, doesn't speak English, and literally 4 years later, he becomes the youngest Mr. Universe ever because he said to himself, I will be Mr. Universe. And then he proceeds to win the thing 7 times. No one's ever won it more than 3 besides him, right? And then he says, they say to him after he wins his first one, well, what are your goals now that you're Mr. Universe? And he says, I will be the biggest movie star in America. I will be the first movie star ever to be paid $1 million for a single movie. He doesn't speak English. He's saying this in whatever language he speaks, Austrian or German or something, one of those, right? And I guess there's no Austrian language, so it's got to be like German or French or something. Based on his accent, I'm going to go German. But anyway, so he says that to them, and then he does it. It's crazy, right? I mean, that's an insane amount of mindset, and it's like, he gets over to California and he's doing weightlifting stuff in like Gold's Gym or whatever, and then he gets his little movie break, but he doesn't make any money on it. The lifting movie, right? They won some awards and stuff
Pump and
for
Iron.
it. Yeah, Pump and Iron. I mean, it was a good movie, but he didn't make any money because he wasn't famous, and it was a low budget movie, and anyway, he's doing that, and he's like, well, I got to make money. So he starts like a construction company, hires people that don't speak English to do construction work, and he goes and sells the jobs, right? And he makes this money doing this construction company, takes the money from that, he starts a mail order business where he sells like pamphlets, right? And then while he's doing that, he takes the money from all this stuff and he buys himself an apartment complex in freaking LA,
wow.
right? And boom, millionaire. Then he becomes a movie star. You know how he becomes a movie star? He throws really big parties for rich Hollywood people at his apartment complex.
I remember hearing his schedule throughout the day. He went to go work out in the morning from like 7 to 8. Then he'd do construction all day.
Yeah.
And then come back to the gym and work out again.
But it's all about like refusing, talking about taking full responsibility for your situation, right? But it's also about refusing to not get what you want. Just saying, this is what I'm going to do, and then going to do it. I mean, and it applies to everything. Like, the guy, like, literally didn't speak English, and he's a foreigner, and he came here, and he married into the Kennedy family and became a Republican governor in California. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, what Kennedy gets to be a Republican governor, right? Anywhere, let alone in California.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, we really appreciate you coming on today. And is there a place where our listeners can reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm everywhere. If they Google me, they'll find me.
Yeah.
But probably Instagram's best, at Jeffrey Holst on Instagram. Or in either of my Facebook groups. I've got the Old Fashioned Real Estate group and Last Life Ever private group on Facebook. Those are really good places to reach out to me, too. Or my personal website, jeffreyholst.com, or oldfashionedrealestate.com. Any of those.
Or oldfashionedtaxsavings.com.
Well, there's no place to reach out to me there. That takes you over to the tax savings guys.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.